Good morning, Jamie Downs. How are you?
Good morning, Jeffrey. Great.
I enjoy the mornings where we have the opportunity to get up, we go on a walk, and we talk all about different things, including what we're going to talk about on the podcast.
I love that too. I have to admit, I have a streak to run walk, and there's some days that I'm excited to run, but there's a lot of days that I'm like, oh yes, we're going to walk today.
You are a conversationalist, and I know that when we're out on our run walk together, if we run at a pace where we can't talk, that is frustrating.
I better be training for something, because otherwise I'm like, why aren't we talking?
Because we have great conversations. I mean, the streaking methodology really was developed as we were walking and talking. And sometimes we'd be running and talking. Actually, a lot of times, I think we're pretty much half and half.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that you say you walk
We're a
lot,
little more than half and half. We really do run more than we walk. But I do like I love the conversation. We have worked a lot of things out, running and walking.
In the book, we wrote about an experience that we had when we were getting ready for a marathon. And I had given you the gift of a marathon, which some people think is not really a gift at all, but a torture device.
No, it was a gift. The gift was that we would train together.
In that training, we wrote about how we adopted from the movie A Far Off Place. Is it A Far Off Place? Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's it.
It is. It's A Far Off Place.
Okay.
You're right.
It's with Reese Witherspoon, and I don't know who the male actor is. However,
a very young Reese Witherspoon.
A very young Reese Witherspoon. And they had to cross the Kalahari Desert. And in crossing the Kalahari Desert, they had conflict and difficulty. They were with a bushman that was walking with them, and he imparted to them his sage wisdom, which was they were both fighting, the male character and whoever Reese Witherspoon's character was. They were fighting with each other and said, well, you just go without me. And, just go on ahead. Or someone would get physically unable to move forward because they were dehydrated or not feeling right or good or any of those things. And I remember the bushman, he came up with the phrase that you and I use all the time now, which is,
we go together or we stop.
We go together or we stop. And so in marathon training, that's what we did.
Yep. And the thing that I've loved is sometimes it's okay to stop. Sometimes we need to stop. Or we're like, okay, we need to stop because we're not going together on this one.
No.
So we need to stop and reevaluate.
And that has been really a mantra that we've used through a lot of things in our life. That metaphor has been used not just for running or walking, but also as we're making major decisions,
right? And
deciding whether or not to go forward with something. It's been good. I've enjoyed that part of our marriage where we truly are saying if one of us says no, then it's no, and we figure out what we need to do.
What we need to do to make
going forward.
I also love that we came up with a simple way to communicate a huge idea. So we can say we go together or we stop, and there's a lot of meaning behind that for both of us. And I think that same thing happens as more people streak, and as we have this shared experience, we have these things that we can say that have a lot of meaning behind them because we have this shared experience of going through the process of understanding streaking and what it's done to change you from the inside. Mm-hmm. And so we get these little things that we can say that we're like, I can't think of one right now, but I feel
go
like
together or we stop is one of them. And you're right. I'm trying to think of any others. It's always hard on the spot to come up with those things. It's in the moment when you're experiencing the emotion of the thing that you
I'm going to look for them now. Those little phrases that we have in streaking that communicate a lot.
Laughably said. Well, the laws of streaking actually communicate quite a bit. That's where and if you're just joining us, by the way, welcome, fellow streakers. We're glad you're in with us on this conversation. Sometimes we just get going and talking and forget that, we're also talking with you.
Feel free to interrupt and just, say, hey, guys, I got something to say here.
Absolutely. We'd love that.
But you're right. The laws of streaking kind of are those. Like we can say laughably simple. And to someone who hasn't been streaking, that doesn't have the volume of meaning to someone who has been streaking for a year or two. Mm-hmm. That laughably simple means something. There's a whole bunch of context behind that and experience and belief. Mm-hmm. And then the same, no record, no streak.
Right.
That means something. There's a lot of context behind that when you've been streaking for a little bit.
Absolutely. So speaking of the laws, law number 1 is make it laughably simple. Law number 2, no record, no streak. And law number 3 is create a community. And those 3 things were developed through us running and walking and going together or stopping.
Right.
And really discussing and figuring out, why is it that streaking works? What is it about it that makes it so compelling when so many things before that we weren't able to use to continue to progress?
And I love that it's not like we invented it. I feel more that these things are all things that through history people have learned, and which is why I can read articles and find streaking in so many things.
Yes.
Is because the principles and the truth have been there forever. What we put together was this methodology, this understanding that if you do these three things, if you keep it laughably simple, if you keep a record of it, and if you create a community, you can create consistency and change in your life.
I have found also, as this month we're talking about professional streaks and how to employ streaking in your professional life. At first, when we started streaking, I applied it more to personal things.
Me too.
And what I could do to improve in my personal life, and that would be in my spiritual life or my physical life, is where I equate a lot of the personal things that I do as far as streaking is concerned.
And I wonder if most people have started in that same place because we think about our personal lives first, our own personal growth, those places that, our personal relationships, our health, our those spiritual things that we wanted to do. Those things are going to come at us first. Those are the things that. So I bet a lot of people start in a personal arena.
Do you think that's because it's most dear and near to our heart? Is that's where we want to start? Is right there? Is because? Do you think that? And
so
go ahead.
Health. I think all of us, if you don't have your health, it really inhibits your life. And so most of us, the very first place, one of the first things we're going to think about is how can I be more healthy? And then in terms of our personal growth, I think those are the things that are near and dear to us.
That have a significant impact on our closest relationships, and then also impact our professional relationships.
Right.
Because if things aren't going well at home, it's very difficult in professional life to do those things.
Yes. It has your personal life has a huge impact on your professional life.
You're looking at me like, are you thinking of some things?
No, I'm just thinking that's so true.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking is how nice and focused a professional life can be when your personal life is in order.
Yeah.
And how difficult professional life can be when your personal life is not in order.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can turn it off, but there's always this thing in the back of your mind that knows.
Yeah. I know that when as a consultant before COVID, I traveled a lot. And I know that when I would leave to go to consult with a client and you and I were at odds with one another, it was very difficult. I mean, there were times where, there are times where you just have to shut it off and do the job.
Right.
Because there's other things that are going on in the sense of I need to provide for the family. I need to fulfill the responsibilities and roles that I've taken on in our family relationship. And so I need to be able to categorize it and shut it off.
And I think that's important because we can't just go around altering everything based on the way we feel in the moment. I mean, there's times you have to be like, all right, we're shutting those feelings up because I've got things I need to get done.
Well, I owe it to the client. This needs to get done.
I've got a commitment.
Exactly.
This needs to happen.
However, I have found that it's more difficult. I mean, it's a lot of efforting. And so the energy and strength to continue on with the client is difficult because in the back of my mind is that itch that we're unresolved, that there's something that we're not in harmony
And I
with.
think those long-term effects when your personal life is not going well, that has a long-term effect on your professional life. If you can't, because I think we all have those moments where, obviously our personal life isn't perfect all the time. We have conflict with family members that need to be worked through. That's just normal life. But when you have something that's long-term and isn't getting fixed, it does weigh on you a lot.
Mm-hmm. Which is why we go back to the streaking methodology and say, what can I do in my personal life to be the person I want to be in my relationships? I remember we got from a fellow streaker out there just how once she started to focus in on what was significant in her personal life, in the sense of not allowing the professional life to take over the personal life, that the streaks helped to solidify the relationships that she had with the most important people in her life.
Yeah, I loved that email. She talked about how that she was doing really well in her professional life, but that it was taking a toll on her personal life.
Right.
And that streaking gave her permission to put those things in her personal life back in perspective.
Yeah.
And that was helping. And it was great because she said, it hasn't necessarily affected my productivity at work.
Right.
But it affected the way she was feeling about things. And that, in the long term, I do feel like has a massive amount of impact when we can be able to be focused and settled. When you can go to work and feel settled that things at home are okay, that has a huge amount of impact in your ability to be productive at work. And the same thing when you can come back home and be like, okay, I can leave work and be settled at home.
Yeah.
That has
both support each other. They're not an escape from one another. It's not
Right.
I'm trying to escape work at home, or I'm trying to escape home at work.
right.
I am progressing in both of those areas.
And the thing that's amazing about streaking is it gives people a place to start. It gives, because I think the things that we're talking about can be very complex challenges when you're dealing with people, whether that be at work
You and I,
or at
your
home.
children, you
Yeah.
know, interactions with any type of person anywhere.
Clients,
Yeah. Oh,
colleagues, children, spouses, church people, grocery store people, anything.
anyone. People that drive in front of me in traffic.
Yes, that lady that waited for me at Target to call me a bad name because I did something that she
Oh, that
thought
was such the story.
That affected me for days. I cried and cried and cried.
Okay,
for
we
days.
have to take the
I'm
tangent.
not telling the story.
You have to tell the story.
Nope.
Everyone is going to be like, what story is she talking about?
Do we have time? Okay. It's a terrible story. I hate this story. I should have never brought it up.
You brought it up.
I brought it up.
You brought it up. And I think
But
that,
it brings up a good
you know,
point.
not only does it bring up a good point, I think it's something that all of us have to be conscious of and wary of. And I know that I'd see you thinking about it and thinking,
I know. I'm
should I even say
deciding,
this?
do I really want to share this story? It was years ago.
Years and years ago.
I was a young mom. And by a young mom, I mean I had several. I think I had four
3 or 4.
children at the time. And I had been running a bunch of errands with the kids. And in the process of running errands, I had left my credit card at Target. And so a couple hours go past and I realize I don't have my credit card. And I'm panicked and thinking, what did I do with my credit card? Where did it go? What have I done? And all that comes in with that.
You were pregnant at the time.
I think
I remember
was
you
pregnant.
had 3 and you were
You're
pregnant.
Right. That's why I cried for 3 days. So I was 3 and pregnant. And I had been running all of these errands and all that goes through with when you think you're going to lose your credit card, you're going to have to cancel everything. I'm going to have to do all of this. It's just such a pain.
Right.
And so I retraced my steps and found out that I had left it at Target.
Yeah.
And so it was later in the afternoon now. I'd been running errands all day and they were holding my credit card for me. And so what I did is I parked my car. I left the 3 kids in the car because I didn't want to unload everybody to just run in. I'd been doing this all day long. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to leave the kids in the car really quick.
It wasn't the middle of the summer.
It wasn't summer.
They weren't at risk. You were
No.
looking at it. It's like, look, I've covered all the bases.
Yes.
Everything is okay.
And my oldest
Even though
would
now
have
people would
been-
be like, I can't believe
I know,
you
that's
left your
why I was
children in the car.
hesitant to
I
even
know.
tell them. This was in the olden days, you guys, when we weren't so terrible for doing these things. No.
But honestly, it's one of the things where you're weighing all of the different risks and benefits and saying, look, it's going to take me 30 seconds to go into that store,
and that
grab
was
it,
it,
and come back
and come
because you
back
had a
out.
parking spot that was close. You had all those things.
So I did. I locked the car. I went in. I grabbed my credit card. I came back out. And when I came out, there was a woman waiting at my car. And
she had parked right behind you.
She had parked right next to me.
But she had parked next to you, or was she behind you, like blocking your way to
Honestly,
get out?
yes. She was waiting for me. She wasn't parked. You're right. She was waiting for me.
Yeah.
And when I came out, she just looked at me and she said, did you leave your kids in the car? And being who I am, I start to explain the whole situation. And she just looked at me and she called me a bad word and she just called me a bad word. And then she drove off.
Yeah.
I was devastated for days. I'm not joking, you guys. I cried for 4 days over that. In my mind, I went back and forth, the things that I could have said, justifying my actions. Then I spent hours thinking, she's right. I'm a terrible person. What? I left my kids in the car by themselves. And then the next minute I'm like, no, she's a terrible person. Who waits to call a person a bad name? Did she even ask about what I had going on for my day?
Could she not
and then
see that I was pregnant?
At some point I was like, I should have just thanked her. I should have said, thank you for watching my kids. I needed the help. It was nice of you to sit here and wait and make sure they were safe so I could run in and grab my credit card.
Yeah.
Why did I get on this story again?
Because we were talking about personal
interactions with people.
Yeah,
that was
interactions
a
with
woman
people.
that I had no idea. I didn't know her. She never left me her name. But I tell you, that woman affected my life. Even to this day, I can still evoke the emotions I felt in that moment. And it's been, gee whiz, probably 20 years.
So the advice that you would give for young moms right now is what? Just take the kids in, or what would you give them
I'm
now?
going to give advice to the people that see the young mom.
Yes.
And say, you know what? Offer to help.
Yeah.
Recognize that
Hey, I
she's
saw that
doing
you
the
went
best
in.
she
I
can.
just stayed here and watched after your kids while you were in.
Yes.
Just wanted to let you know. I know it's a tough day.
Exactly. Just cut people a little slack because
Yeah.
we don't know
A lot of time
what
to
they've
make.
got going on in their life.
Yeah.
We just don't.
And bringing that back to streaking, I believe that as we in our personal lives are streaking, in other words, one of the streaks that I think about for myself is I want to be a person who is of service to others. Now, there's many different ways that can be accomplished. And to do that, well, I think about Laurel and her streak of send at least one thoughtful note or text daily. Had you been, or had that individual been in that mindset, you see what I mean?
Yes, they could have looked at it as an opportunity to serve
To
somebody
serve someone.
instead of an opportunity to come in and
Right.
give me 1, 2, and what for. Because I was obviously a terrible parent.
Obviously.
We were going to talk about professional streaks.
Which we
today.
have been talking about professional streaks in the sense that when you have when your personal streaks are moving forward and progressing, I think that's when I started in on my professional streaks, on what is it that I can now do professionally to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And as looking at that, so this brings up the subject of today in the sense of building your professional streaking resume.
I love that. Looking at it as a resume.
Yeah.
This is my resume. These are my streaks.
These are my streaks. This is what I do on a consistent basis.
Because that's great. What is a resume? A resume is, look how great I am. Don't you want to hire me?
I think so it's two sides. Let's look at both sides of this. The accomplishment, which is what usually gets put in the resume.
On the resume. Yep.
Here's all of my accomplishments. Here's everything that I've done. Aren't you impressed? Mm-hmm. The interesting part about that, as far as listing your accomplishments, is accomplishments can be embellished.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is I can get an accomplishment that was a bluebird. It wasn't necessarily, I wasn't fully responsible for that accomplishment, but because I want to look good for my potential employer and to show that I can get results, I'm going to list that on there. And that is how most resumes are built, is on accomplishments. That's how I've built my resumes. That's how I believe a lot of people have built their resumes. Look at what we've accomplished. And in fact, it's also what we celebrate is look what I've accomplished.
Yep. And I think, and we teach that from the very beginning. When you're applying to a college, they want to know, what have you accomplished?
Mm-hmm. Isn't it interesting?
Because I just look at it and I'm like, at that age, you don't always have a ton that you're still figuring out who you want to be sometimes. And so looking and switching that focus a little bit
to the inputs now. So I was talking with a sales professional yesterday, and I was commenting on her excellence. She's one of the top sales professionals in our field. She always is getting the accomplishment. She always gets all the awards, all of the, and when I say awards, the President's Club Award. She is usually the top salesperson in the company.
Oh, wow.
Not just, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of sales representatives. And she's usually at the top. And I was talking to her a little bit about streaking. And I said, you are a streaking sales professional. And I listed out to her why I thought that. And she said to me, as she spoke back to me, and she said, what I fear, she said it in this way, what I fear is to have an empty pipeline. And in sales, an empty pipeline means you're not selling anything. You're not getting the accomplishments. You're not getting in what you want to. And she said the most interesting thing. She said, so I only focus on making sure the pipeline is full every single day. And then she says, I don't worry about the accomplishments. The accomplishments will come.
Wow.
And with that, so that's what I look at with streaking is imagine if you had a streaking resume where not listed was the accomplishments, but was all of the things you're doing on a consistent basis that led to an accomplishment. What she does is she contacts at least one new person daily. And she weekly ensures that one of the other things I asked her about is she, on a daily basis, ensures that she has responded to any client that has reached out to her within that day. Oh. And so that's another streak that she has. Those are a couple of things that she does consistently all the time on a streaking basis. And imagine if now she was able to put that on a resume, or not was able to, but she put that on a resume. For the last 1,263 days, I have answered and fulfilled all client requests daily.
And what I love about that is, because I was thinking, is that laughably simple? But as I've watched you work through your email streak, reaching out to someone who's contacted you is as simple as, I acknowledge that you've contacted me. I'm thinking about what you've asked. You don't have to solve the problem or do the thing they've asked you to, but just reaching out and saying, I heard you, does a ton. And then it helps sort through, okay, I know I've got these things coming up. But
Absolutely.
I wonder how often, I know for me sometimes, I don't reach out because I'm like, well, I haven't done what they've needed yet, or I can't answer their question yet, or I can't. And so I want to wait till I can tell them something. I want to wait until, but then other things come in while I'm waiting to answer their question. And now I'm backlogged and now I'm overwhelmed. Whereas I love that streak of, I'm going to reach out to every person that reaches out to me. And what does that do? What does that communicate to the person that reached out? Oh, I'm on your radar.
Yeah.
Like, I'm here and you heard, and even if it's just that, even if it's just, you got my email.
Right.
Like, that is huge.
It is. And imagine building your resume with those type of things. I have 4 or 5 streaks that I want to show you, potential employer, that I do on a consistent basis. And those things are, and we'll talk about them a little bit more in the next podcast, but building your streaking resume, I think, is more powerful than listing any of the accomplishments, because I know I would be more interested in someone saying, this is what I do to get to where I need to be.
Right. I agree. I think it's more powerful.
Absolutely. So on our next podcast, we're going to continue this conversation. And I think let's go into how you write a professional B statement as well. If you're interested in having us answer a few questions or sharing with us your professional streaks, please do so at Jeffrey, Jeffery, at streakingmastery.com.
Or Jamie at JAMI at streakingmastery.com.
Until we talk again.
Keep streaking.